The topic of today's message is the type of giving that commands a heavenly response. The type of giving that commands a heavenly response. The type of giving that commands a heavenly response. The type of giving that commands a heavenly response. The type of giving that commands a heavenly response. As much as I don't like to talk about giving, especially when it comes to giving, in the church and the way the churches have abused giving, I also want to say that giving is also part of the Bible. And we are going to look at the kind of giving, not just at every kind of giving, but the type of giving that commands a heavenly response. Hebrews 11 verse 4. The type of giving that commands a heavenly response. The type of giving that commands a heavenly response. The type of giving that commands a heavenly response. And we must learn that kind of giving that commands a heavenly response. So let us look into the scripture. Hebrews 11 verse 4. Hebrews 11 verse 4 says, by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. A more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which Abel obtained witness, testimony, a response that he was righteous by giving. God testifying of his gifts, amazing stuff. God himself testified about a man's giving. God testifying of his gifts or of his giving, and by it, he, being dead, yet speaketh. This man gave to the extent that even though he was dead, yet he was still speaking. Can you believe that? It's like a fairy tale. It's like it's impossible, it's unreal. It is unreal. I would like us to read that scripture again. I mean, you can't believe it. So I'm teaching today on the topic, the type of giving that commands a heavenly response. The type of giving that commands a heavenly response. And it says, Hebrews 11 verse 4. By faith, Abel offered God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained a witness that he was righteous. God testifying of his gifts. Can you imagine? This guy gave to the extent that God began to give testimony for him. And was beginning to give testimony about his giving. God testified about his giving. And by that giving, he, Abel, being dead, was still speaking after he was dead. This is the kind of teaching that commands a heavenly response. And this is the kind of teaching that we all should know about. This is the kind of teaching that we must all embrace. This is the kind of giving that we need to not just know about, we need to embrace and we need to practice. But not too many Christians know about this kind of giving. Most Christians are more familiar with giving of tithe and offering, and giving of the kind of giving that is egocentric and selfish. That is what has been preached in our churches, not this kind of giving. I'm going to tell you what makes this giving unique. And what is that kind of giving? What is that giving that commands a heavenly response? If you need to know about giving, you need to know about this one. You need to stop practicing all kind of manipulative giving that we are seeing in churches today. You need to stop practicing all kind of evil manipulation that people call giving today. An oppression that people call giving today. That must be stopped so that, we as Christians will discover the heart of God concerning giving, and we'll be able to begin to practice that kind of giving that will make God excited and that will make heaven to respond to us. So Hebrews 11 verse 4, the giving that commands a heavenly response. Now, as much as I've heard many people preach on giving, I've not heard too many people preach on giving from this particular passage, and in the sense that I'm going to talk to you about today. This man, Abel, gave God an offering that God was so impressed by his giving that God had to testify, and God had to physically respond to his giving and to his offering. God has to, heaven has to respond to this man's giving. So it means that his giving was so impressive, not just to the heavenly host, but to God himself. God himself was impressed by this man's giving. Can you believe it? What kind of giving should this be to make God to be impressed? And it's one thing for God to be impressed, but for God to be so impressed that God saw it as necessary to respond to this person's giving. But not just that God saw it necessary to respond, but God saw it necessary not just to respond, but to commend and to compliment this person's giving. That is beyond the ordinary. And that is what we need. That is beyond the ordinary, and that is what we need. That is the kind of teaching that we all need to really get to know and to practice. That's the kind of giving that we need to know and to practice. So I'm sure that all of you that are here, especially those of you who are Christians, you have always been giving and you've been taught to give. And I'm sure you've given a lot. Now, my question to you is this. How many times have you given to God in your life? That's number one question. Number two question. Even more importantly, how many of these givings that you have given to the Lord has commanded God's response? How many of these times that you have given to God have commanded God's response? So next question, not just commanding God's response, how many of the times that you have given has impressed God so much that God had to compliment you? How many of your giving has commanded God's compliment on you? I mean, when God compliments, it means that God is so impressed that he couldn't keep quiet about it. Can you imagine yourself giving to God so much that God will find it impossible to keep quiet? But when you look at the Bible, you see that there have been people who have been impressed by God that way. I mean, who have impressed God that way. And each time you see that so people give to God and God was so impressed that he complimented and he gave a heavenly response, you will also see that these people have something in common. They had something in common. There was something so unique and different about their giving that made God to be impressed and to respond. And I will tell you what is that kind of giving. What is it in the giving of these people that made heaven to respond and God to be impressed, and for God to compliment these people who gave? So we see now one of the few people that gave to God, actually the first person that impressed God so much that God couldn't hold back. God had to give a compliment, was Abel. This Abel that we are talking about. So Abel impressed God so much with his giving that God couldn't keep quiet. There were other situations when people gave to God so much, and God was so impressed the same way that even God himself couldn't keep quiet. One of such cases is the story of the widow. You remember this widow that we read about in Mark chapter 12? The story of the widow that took a widow's mite or bite or whatever, mite, and offered it, and Jesus was sitting down there just to have a look at this widow's mite, and Jesus was so impressed that, I mean, Jesus is God, God in the flesh, and he was so impressed by this widow's offering that he couldn't keep quiet about it. He had to comment, and not just comment and respond, but he had to also compliment and praise the widow for her mite. So this is the second situation we are seeing. Abel gave and impressed God so much that God had to speak and commend this Abel. Then we see another situation here of a widow who gave, that God was so impressed that Jesus couldn't keep quiet. He had to send an immediate response. And that response was not just any kind of response, it was a compliment of the highest order. Now, besides that, let me give you another example, 3 examples. I'll actually give you 4 examples. 4 examples of people who gave, and their giving impressed God so much that God has to respond. The third person whose giving commanded a heavenly response was Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene. What did she give? She came with the alabaster oil and poured that oil on the head of Jesus. I mean, God was so impressed, heaven was so impressed by her, that Jesus said she had even actually laid a memorial, a monument for herself. And anywhere this story was going to be read, that is going to be read it's going to be spoken about her, in memory of her. So this was a kind of giving that, in fact, all the order of Jesus' disciples, all of them, were pissed off by what she did. But while they were being pissed off by what she was doing, Jesus was commending her and praising her for what she did. So that is another story. That's the third story of somebody who gave and that God couldn't resist it, but to compliment and to praise these people. Now, the last one, the last people that impressed God so much by their giving is what we see in 2 Corinthians. Let me look for that for you. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 5. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 5. Actually, it starts from verse 1. It is the Macedonian church. The Macedonian believers. So it was in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, from verses 1 to 5. It says, "Moreover, brethren, we do you to wit of the grace of God bestowed upon the churches of Macedonia, how that in great trial of affliction the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded unto the riches of their liberality. For to their power I bear record, yea, and behold, their power they were willing to give of themselves, praying us praying us with much entreaty that we would receive the gift and take upon us the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. And this they did, not as we hoped, but first gave their own selves to the Lord, and unto us by the will of God. They gave of their own self. They gave of their own self by the will of God. Well, so what is this giving that commands a heavenly response? What is the giving that will make heaven not just to go unnoticed, no, but that will make you not just to go unnoticed? What is this giving that will make God to notice you? And not just to notice you, that will command God, that will make God to compliment you and to praise you. What did all these people did that made God to compliment them and for them to deserve a heavenly response? What kind of giving did they do that became a memorial and that made us to be talking about this giving up to today? It is not what you are thinking, my dear. It is not what you are thinking. And it is not the kind of thinking that we are familiar with today. But in all of these givings, there is something uniform. There is something uniform, something general, something common in all of them. And like we said, the story started with Abel. Then I went to the widow's mite. Then to Mary Magdalene. Then to the Macedonian church. So what is this giving? Listen close now. Listen closely now. You must hear this. You must not miss this. The kind of giving that commands a heavenly response is not a giving that is defined by money or cash. It could be money or cash, but it is not that defines it. And it is not giving of money. I really want to point that out first, because most of the time in the churches today, we always think that the only way to give to God is by offering money and giving offering, bringing money. But the kind of giving that really touched the heart of God were in different verses, okay, for example, in the case of Abel, it was not money. It was the fruit of his labor. In the case of Maria Magdalene, in the case of Mary Magdalene, her own was not money; it was oil. In the case of Macedonia, it says they gave of themselves, so they didn't talk about money there. Only in one case, in the case of the widow, it talked about the widow's mite, the little coins that she gave. It was only time that was talking about money. So the kind of giving that commands a heavenly response is not about money. And I think that the church today in the world, the church today in our world must stop talking too much about money. The church of the Lord Jesus Christ today must shift our focus from money, because money is mammon. And if we are not careful, we will be enthroning the lordship of mammon over the church without even knowing. If we will emphasize money so much that we don't even know that we have crossed the line. We will not even know at what stage we crossed the line. We will not even know at what stage we are already worshiping mammon rather than worshiping God. Even though we are using the name of God, we are using the project of God, the work of God as the excuse, but in most of the cases, when we are only, talking about money as the main way of giving and as the only way of giving to please God, I'm sorry. In most of those cases, we are actually polluting people. We are polluting people's hearts, we are polluting people's lives, and we are damaging their faith in God, because everybody now is running after money and trying to impress God with their money. But it is not your money that impresses God, it's your giving. Not giving of what? I'm going to talk about that. But it's not money. So let's settle that first. So the emphasis, too much emphasis on tithe and offering is derailing the church, And too much emphasis on giving money is derailing the church. Do you know, even when we talk about tithe, do you know that in the Old Testament, tithe is not in money? When we talk about tithe, we are not talking about money also in the Old Testament. And then when we get to the New Testament, Jesus only spoke about tithe one time. And the only thing he said about tithe was that don't forget, but because you are giving your tithe, you have now forgotten the weightier matters of the law. And the weightier matters of the law of the world, the weightier matters that impress God is not tithe, it's not money, it's not giving money or tithe. There are some other things, there are some other givings that are the weightier matter of the law, that are weightier matter of God, that are weightier matters of the kingdom. So, of course, Jesus said, you can, give your tithe and don't forget. You can do one and don't forget the other. But but the way we have talked about giving and about money, about tithe these days, it's just overwhelming. It's a delusion. I think the doctrine of giving of money, the way we have been teaching it these days in the churches, it's a delusion. It has become a principality. It has become a deception that we don't even notice. It has become a god. Mammon has enthroned itself as a god on its own in our churches without us knowing. And to the extent that people keep record if you give money or if you don't give money in your church. To the extent that some people relate to their church members according to how much money they bring. And if they bring money or not. Jesus said it's the opposite. That your left hand should not know, your right hand should not know what your left hand is doing. Your right hand should not know what your left hand is doing. So nobody should even know what you are giving or you are giving at all. It's horrible. It's horrible. So now that I've made my point clear that I'm not talking about money, I'm not talking about cash, even though it could be cash. You see, we saw that one of the 4 examples that I gave, one of them was money. But it's not just about money. It's not just about money, all right? So, what is the kind of giving that touches the heart of God so much that it will command a heavenly response? The kind of giving we are talking about here is not material and is not something that has to be expressed just either by money or by any other thing. The kind of offering that commands God's, the kind of giving that commands God's interest, God's attention, listen closely, is the ability to sacrifice and to offer yourself. It is the giving of yourself, your life. It is the commitment of yourself, of your life, your total commitment, your total giving, your total commitment. It is an absolute commitment, the sacrifice of self, the sacrifice of your depth, of your call, of your crux, of your heart, of your totality. It is your giving of yourself. It is the giving of yourself that commands God's response. When you are able to give God not just some change, not just some change, not just some symbols, but the ability to put yourself. It could be in symbols, it could be expressed in different ways, but the ability for you to give your heart and yourself, to sacrifice yourself at the altar of the Lord. That is the kind of giving we are talking about. And I can prove that to you. So it is this giving that separated and differentiated the giving of Abel from the giving of Cain. You see, Cain also brought sacrifice. Cain also brought an offering. But he didn't bring the offering of himself. So God is not talking about our leftovers. Most of the time when we give, we're only giving God our change, our leftovers. But God needs you. If you look at the Bible very well, if you look at the scripture very well, from the Old Testament to the New Testament, you will see that the only thing God is really interested in, the only thing God is interested in, the only thing God is interested in is you. The only offering that God is interested in, the only offering that impresses the heart of God is the living sacrifice of yourself. That's why Paul was talking about that we should give ourselves as a living sacrifice, 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 living sacrifice, living sacrifice. The ability to sacrifice your heart, your time, your call, your life, the ability to offer of yourself, to be able to give God your totality, your all, is the kind of giving that makes God to turn his head like this. You are able to offer yourself to this extent. You are able to sacrifice yourself to this level. No, that is what impresses. That's what impresses God. That's what impresses God's heart. Not just money. It could be expressive money, don't get me wrong, but for you to be able to give money it's never money. Because for you to be able to give money to that extent, then you have to give like David did or Solomon did. And many of us are not as rich to be able, you have to give like Solomon did or like David did. You know, David was the one who said, I will not offer to God, I will not give to God something that doesn't cost me to sacrifice, that doesn't cost me to sacrifice. He's sacrificing of himself, of his life. The giving that commands God's response is the giving of one's life. Not just the giving of one's life, like I said, just give your life to the Lord, that will say, but the sacrifice of one's life. What Abel did was that he didn't just give his offering. He didn't just give his fruits. He didn't just give his produce. He walked. He gave his life. He sacrificed so much and then gave everything to God. That is the same thing that the widow with the widow's mite. That is the same thing she did. Can you imagine? She lived all her life. And everything she had been able to gather through her lifetime was that two widow's mite. And she gave everything. That widow's mite symbolizes our life. So she now brought that widow's mite, these two widow's mite, she brought them and sacrificed. So she was sacrificing her whole life. In those widow's mite were alive. She offered her total life, her totality, all what she had been able to come up with through her whole lifetime. The totality of her life, she just brought an offer. It is the sacrifice. It has to be sacrificed, not just giving. The sacrifice of your life. Anyhow you can do it, anyhow you wish to do it, anyhow you could express it, it's consistent. Abel expressed the sacrifice of her life by bringing, his produce, the result of his life, the result of his labor. And that also symbolizes his life. Because he spent all his life, he converted his time into the production of those produce and then brought all of them. That is a symbol of his life. That is what he gave his life for. That is what he had been able to gather with his life. That is what his life has been able to produce. So he now came, didn't use it for himself, didn't spend the result on himself. He now sacrificed everything he has spent his life gathering. He now offered it and as a sacrifice to God. That was his life. That was his life. He offered his life. He gave his life. That is the sacrifice. That is the giving that touches the heart of God. That is the kind of giving that makes God to respond. That is the kind of giving that makes everyone to respond. That is the kind of giving that makes God to compliment you. The symbol, the thing he has invested his life in, his life investment. That's what it is. His life investment, his life labor, his life work. He just gave and sacrificed and just offered, and just sacrificed his whole life, investment, and gave to God like that. That is the kind of sacrifice that touches the heart of God. It's not about tithe and offering. It's not about prophets offering. It's not about money offering. It's not about faith offering or some money. It's not about money. It's about sacrificing of life. Let me give you another example. We remember the example of Abraham. God also complimented Abraham that he was willing to sacrifice his son. You see, it was not money also. The sacrifice that Abraham was giving was the sacrifice of Isaac. It was the sacrifice of his own very son. Why? Because to Abraham, Isaac was the symbol of Abraham's life. At that point, he was already went over 100 years old because, and Isaac, the boy was already grown up. So it was the only hope he was living for. The only thing he was living for took his life. It is basically his life and the life of his wife. He took everything that symbolizes their life, the totality, and he was coming to sacrifice it to God. And God said, stop. Now you have done it. You have impressed me enough. No, I'm already impressed enough. You have done it. You have done it. You got the mark. You passed the exam. It is what God is looking for. God is looking for that point when you be able to totally just offer your heart, your life, and just say, I give it all as a living sacrifice. I just offer myself. I just put myself on the altar. I just put myself right now as a sacrifice to you. That could be expressed in different ways. In the case of Isaac, is what symbolizes his life most at that particular point is the thing he was living for. Because in Isaac was his aspirations. In Isaac were his future. In Isaac were his destiny, his hope. So it is the totality of his life. It is the subtotal of his everything he has lived for and hoped for and God. So you remember that Abraham had money. Abraham had wealth. If it is wealth that God was looking for, if it is money that God was looking for, if it is money that was going to impress God, Abraham would have been ready to give any amount of money, any amount of money would have let all the money go. But it was a living sacrifice God was looking for. Sacrifice of your total self. When you take anything that symbolizes your totality, anything that symbolizes your total life, anything that symbolizes the totality of your life, and you are able to take your life and symbolize it and package it and offer it. That was what Abel did. He gathered his whole life, the symbol. He put his whole life in a package and gave it to God. That is the kind of sacrifice that touches God's heart. The widow did the same thing. She found something that was the symbol of the totality of herself, the total expression of her life. She got her life in one expression and offered up that life. That is what she did. And that is what changed her story. That's what changed her history. The totality of her life. The totality of her life is what made God to pay attention to her. Then look at the lady, Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene, that oil that she poured on Jesus' head, that was not ordinary oil. The story goes that in Israel, when young ladies are born, when young girls are born, their mother and father, their parents, they gather before they were even born, they gather or their wealth and their inheritance, and they gather all they have, all their properties, all their resources, and they give to the lady, and in the form of that oil, so that she will go and marry, because that's that is their gift to her for her married life. That is that is a symbol of her life, of her virginity, of her, not just virginity. That's what she's supposed to give to her, to present to her future family, her future husband. So this was the totality of her own life, the life of her parents. And if she pours that oil like that, it means that she will never marry anymore, because she doesn't have anything again to give to her husband. So this woman took the totality of her life, the representation of her life, and just sacrificed it, poured it out to the Lord, poured it out on God, sacrificed the symbol, the totality, all our lives' savings, all our lives' wealth, all our lives' gathering, it's not money, but it is the symbol of the totality of herself, her life. She brought that whole life and just poured it on the Lord. That is a sacrifice right there. And it is that kind of sacrifice that commands God's response and command God's compliment, and makes God to pay attention to you and say, you could do this for me. Nobody will ever forget you. And that is what Jesus said. You were able to do this, sacrifice your life, and just not even looking back. Burning the bridge like that, not even looking back, not even being afraid that you will not marry anymore. You will live a lonely life. You will not have children. Just bring everything and just sacrifice something like that. You are able to do that for me? Then you will have a memorial and a memory about you that even children will not have been able to give you. You will be so remembered. Anybody that is able to commit to God like this and to sacrifice of themselves to God like this, God gives them a memorial. God speaks about them. God compliments them. And when God compliments you, it lives for life and eternity. When God complimented Abel, it lived for life and eternity. We are still talking about it today. When God complimented Abraham, it lived for time and eternity. We are still talking about it today. When God complimented that widow with that widow's mite, God complimented her. He's still living today. We are still talking about it. When God complimented that Mary, he's still living today. He's still alive today. We are still talking about it. When God, through Paul, complimented the church in Macedonia, he's still alive today. And let me even use this Macedonian story to prove my point to you, that the kind of sacrifice that God is talking about, the kind of sacrifice that commands God's respect and God's honor and God's response, is giving of yourself, of your totality, of your life. It's not giving money. It is not expressed in money. It could be expressed in anything. It could be expressed in service. It could be expressed in time. It could be expressed in conversion. It just means sacrifice of your life. Sacrifice of your life. So, but what we are doing is that we are giving God handouts. We are giving God handout and say, okay, that's what we are now doing. We come to church and say, but I give my tithe, I give my offering. We are just giving God a handout, but we are not giving of ourselves. That is the danger we are in. See what the Macedonian church here did. The Bible says here, verse 3, in 2 Corinthians 8, verse 3, 2 Corinthians 8, verse 3, it said, for to their power I bear witness. You see, that's a testimony right there, a record. Yeah, that's a response. I bear record, I bear witness. Yes, and beyond their power, they were willing to give of themselves, you see. You see the emphasis? You see what it says? It's not giving money. The emphasis is not money here. The emphasis is not cash. The emphasis is not mammon. The emphasis is themselves. They were able to give of themselves. They were able to give of themselves. That is what makes your compliment to be eternal. It's an eternal memory, eternal memorial, eternal compliment. When you are able to find a way of giving of yourself. The way I gave of myself, my own giving to God. Let me give you my own example. My own giving to God was this. when I discovered the power in solitude, even though I wanted to do solitude just once in my lifetime, because I read in books that other men of God did solitude one time, and God came to them and gave them the answer and revealed himself to them. So I wanted God to reveal himself to me one time. I just did it one time. And I did it that one time. I had an encounter with Jesus, and he gave me all my answers, and I know that it's no more God of Abraham, God of Isaac, or God of Jacob. It's now my God. I know him now. I've met him. But then I made a vow that day. I said, God, I'm going to sacrifice, because to be in solitude for weeks and days and weeks and just lock yourself alone away from men, from human beings, not to talk to anybody, just being in a room by yourself, it's not easy. Even that first time was not easy, but I told God I would do this for as long as I can. And sometimes I would not have any, most of the time I didn't have any request. I didn't have any prayer need. I didn't have anything to pray about. I just will come and lock myself in 4 weeks that we have in a month. We have 4 weeks in a month. I will take 1 week away off. I go just alone, from family, from church, from ministry. Just sacrifice my life. I will just not eating, maybe just drinking, and I will just go there 18 hours, 14 hours a day. I will listen, I will study, I will read. Just being in the presence of God, studying, reading. I will rest. I will just being sacrificing, pouring out my life, just nobody else, just to you alone. The sacrifice of myself, my life, that is my own giving. I did it for the next 15 years without missing 1 month, without missing a single month. For the next 15 years straight, I was doing this every single month, 1 whole week, in the presence of God, just pouring out myself. That was my own sacrifice. After I did it for 8 years, my life and destiny so much changed that I could see Jesus every day. I could enter into the spirit. I could go navigate in the spirit. I could talk to God. God became my friend. Not just my God. It became my friend. Became my master. Then I did it for another 7 years. Another 8 years. Or 7 years. So it is sacrifice. Every time I go, it's like I'm dying. I was going to die. In fact, I felt there is nothing I've done in my life as hard as practicing solitude. Nothing as hard. Everything else is easy. That was what was difficult. Each time I go was like dying. I was sacrificing my life for real. I was dying for real. I mean, the way I was doing it before, I was not wise in the beginning. I never used to even take a cassette or, messages. I never even used to take anything, just take one Bible. And I never used to take books. It was later on I discovered that, no, you cannot actually use that time to discover yourself, to develop yourself. I started taking books, cassettes. I started studying, developing myself. I started taking other drinks. Before, I was only drinking water. I mean, sometimes I would lose consciousness. I mean, I would be unconscious. I would just wake up, I see myself on the floor. I say, how did I get here? I've lost consciousness so many times I cannot even remember. I've just disappear, just lose consciousness. But thank God that it's amazing. It's amazing. Thank God, God changed everything. Because by the time I was through, that's why you are listening to me here. It's like when Pastor Sunday speaks, people say he speaks like no human being has spoken. People say we have never seen anybody speak like you speak. People have witnessed. All of you are witnesses. People are giving testimony of what a different grace, what a different anointing, what a different knowledge, wisdom. Where is this wisdom coming from? Where people are saying, this is not just you believers who are saying this. The same thing has been said when I went to the UN to speak. People say, we never had anybody speak like this. And I went to the United Nations, United States Senate, Congress, where the Japanese or Israel Parliament. People have said, we've never heard anybody speak like this. Because heaven has responded. People are talking about sinning or backsliding or getting away from God. It can never happen to me. In fact, I will tell you one secret right now. After I did this for 8 years with God, I began to see God every day. Anytime I want to see God, I can see him. I can switch from, like I'm looking at you right now. I can switch and begin to see what is happening in your life and with your situation. Like somebody right now that is watching me, you're having a situation, bad situation with your head. I think it's headache or something. It's just like you are just losing your mind. God is healing you right now. Another person is having problem with his ears, and God is just healing you. But that's just a sign for you. I can just switch. I'm talking right now, and in the natural, I can just switch in a second, less than a second, into the spirit realm and download and just see God and see Jesus right up and down. That was after 8 years. But after 15 years of just pouring my life like that, God didn't just become like my friend. But, another person said, oh, let him mention my situation because you have a growth in your lump. God is healing you right now. So, but I don't want to get distracted with that. I want to focus. By the time I did it for 15 years, God, to me right now, is like my skin. Just like your skin. You cannot separate yourself and your skin. Your skin is you. It's your content. It's just like me, God and me. It's just like God is my skin. It's my body. Just like God, your skin covers all part of you. That's how I am in God. I'm just covered in him. I'm just in him. Like I'm just enjoying him thorough. That is how my life has become after I spent that period of time just pouring out, just sacrificing. It is the kind of sacrifice giving that commands heavenly response. So when we reduce that just to offering, just to money, I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry, guys. It's horrible. It's the God of Mammon. It is the God of Mammon. It is the God of Mammon that makes us to reduce everything to money. It is horrible. It is horrible. I just don't know what to say about that. Don't reduce giving to just money. It is the giving of your life. In fact, when it talks about, giving money in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, it's talking about giving money not even to God, but to the poor, to the widows, to the strangers, to the orphans, to the, to people who are disenfranchised in the society. Most giving of money that is being talked about in the New Testament and the Old Testament is not about giving to God. It's about giving to people, to help people. I was naked, you didn't feed me. You didn't clothe me. I was hungry, you didn't feed me. I was, I was in hospital. This is the kind of giving that when it's about giving to people, because you cannot give God money. It's giving to people. When it's talking about money, it's giving it to people. Taking care of people who are less privileged, people who have needs. They're giving alms. That is what God is talking about when he's talking about money. So if we really want to talk about giving money, let's give it to people. Let's give it to people, not to church, not to God, not to create in people the impression that they can give money to God and get satisfied, and just by giving money to God and they can just cool God off and say, oh, I'm giving my own share. I've given, that's what most people, that's the attitude that most people have today. They just say, oh, but I give my offering, I give my tithe and offering. So they just they are paying off God, they're bribing God with their money. They are trying to pay God off. They are trying to, we trivialize God. We trivialize God. And it's a shame. We trivialize God just because we think that we can buy God off. We can pay God off. It's a payoff. I have so many more things I could say about this, but I'm not going to continue. Let me see the time. Yeah, my time is over. I'm not going to continue. I'm not going to continue. I think I made my point. Look at all those people Even in this, let me even read that scripture. I didn't read that scripture to the end. That Macedonian church. I only read verse 3. You see, in verse 3, it talks about them giving of themselves. That is what God needs. Only one thing. That is what God needs. They gave of themselves. 2 Corinthians 8 verse 3. Then look at verse 5 again. And these they did, not as we hoped, but first they gave themselves. They gave their own selves to the Lord. And then, not as we hoped. We thought they were just going to give themselves to the Lord alone. But they went beyond what we hoped. They gave of themselves to the Lord, yes. And then they gave of themselves to us by the will of God. But of themselves. That is what made them to be complimented by God, and what made God to praise them through Paul. They were giving of themselves, not just to God alone, but they sacrificed themselves. They gave of themselves to the servants of God as well. That's what they said. They didn't believe it. They couldn't believe that they did beyond what they thought they were able to do. That was necessary. So the ability to sacrifice yourself for God, yourself, is the giving, is the only giving God needs from you. All other givings, all those your tithe offering, all those your pre or prophetic offering, all those prophet offering, breakthrough offering, faith offering, they are all hinged on the desire to get something back. They are all hinged on the desire to, it's all hinged on greed. They are all hinged on greed. We want God to return tenfold. We want God to return 20-fold. We want God to return something to us. We want God to do this to us. It's actually about greed and ego, selfishness. We are all seeking our own interest. But the kind of giving, when you are really giving to God for real, will you sacrifice everything, even the thing that, even if God promises to give you back, even that thing that He wants to give you back, you already sacrificed it before you even get it back or before you even see it. The ability to totally sacrifice yourself, to tell God, I belong to you, I am yours. I mean, women know what this means. When women, fall in love, when a woman finds a man that has been able to communicate and convince her of his love and his dedication to her, when a woman, when a woman is convinced that this man is totally genuine, is mine, is my man, that I believe in him, I trust him. That's when she says, I'm all yours, I'm yours. She opens up totally, and just totally throws herself into his arms. And when she's still having some doubts or some things holding back a little bit, she's not totally open. But when you get a woman to totally open up and just totally give herself like that, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. When you are able to give yourself out to God like that, like a woman will give herself to her husband. When you are able to give yourself totally and just throw yourself at his arms and just offer yourself totally to him and say, I'm all yours. That is what God really needs. That is what Abraham did with Isaac. That is what Abel did. That is what the widow with the two mites, that's what she did. That is what Mary did with the oil, with alabaster oil. That is what Macedonian church did. That is the kind of sacrifice that commands God's response. And God will respond to you beyond your imagination. God will respond to you with so much generosity. He will respond to you with so much of his resources that you will never forget about you. It's a kind of sacrifice that builds you a memory. A memorial. It's a kind of sacrifice that is so huge that people will keep on talking about it after you are gone. This is the kind of sacrifice that makes your name to remain in history. This is the kind of sacrifice when you offer yourself, when you make yourself a living sacrifice. As Paul knows about it, that's what Paul was talking about. Make yourself a living sacrifice. Let's give ourselves to God a living sacrifice. That's not money. He said, living myself. It is those people who have been able to do that, offer themselves as a living sacrifice. They are the ones who live for time and eternity. They are the ones that are never forgotten. They are the ones that are never forgotten. God doesn't allow their memory to die. God does not allow the memory of such people to die. Even when they don't have children, like Mary, their memory still will not die. But when people, reduce all that just to money, it's a shame. It's a shame. It's a shame. It is you that God needs. He wants you to make yourself, to turn yourself to a living sacrifice. He wants you to turn yourself to a living sacrifice and to offer yourself unbridledly to God in totality and His absolute surrender. Nothing like it. Nothing like it. Then God will compensate you. God will reward you. God will honor you like you can never believe it. Like you'll never believe it. Nothing like it. Nothing like it. Believe me. Nothing like it. Nothing like it. Well, if you don't have a copy of this message yet, I want to challenge you to go and just press your share button. Look for the share button under your video. There is a button there, a share button. Look for that share button and press it. When you press that button, when you press that share button, then that's it. You press your share button, it will come to your timeline. So go and look for that share button and press it. When you press that share button, it will come to you. Spread this word and let's set the Church of the Lord Jesus Christ free from manipulation, from deception, and from just lies, and from the spirit of mammon. Let's set the church free. Let's spread the word. God bless you guys.